This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Every 2 years, we do what we call our Joe Debtor study. And in our last study, we discovered that about half of our clients are female. That's no surprise, about half the population is female. But what was more surprising was the differences we discovered between the financial circumstances of men and women. For example, 30% of female insolvent debtors are lone or single parents, compared to only 8% for males. A higher percentage of women cite marital breakdown as the reason for their financial difficulties. Women debtors' take-home pay is 10% below that of the average male insolvent debtor. They're living on a tighter budget, making it harder to keep up with debt payments, even though their total debts are also lower. Student debt is a major issue for female debtors. Their lower pay, intermittent work, and the need to deal with child care can make repaying student debt difficult. So, even those who are trying to improve their financial health through better education are likely to experience financial problems. So it's clear that there are significant differences in certain areas between the financial circumstances of women and men. Well, what are some of the other unique challenges that women face? What help is available specifically to help women address these unique challenges? Those are questions that my guest today can help answer, so let's get started. Who are you? Where do you work? And what do you do?
Hi, my name is Georgia Graham. I'm the Senior Manager of Research and Development at Women's Enterprise Skills Training.
So Women's Enterprise Skills Training, you go by the acronym WEST.
Correct.
What does WEST do? Tell me about WEST.
WEST has been in the community for the past 30 years. We're coming up on our 30th anniversary in March. And we provide training and support to women in the community to help them either return to continue education or re-enter the labor force.
And West has been around for a long time. You've got a fairly substantial operation here in Windsor. Is that correct?
Yes. We service over 3,000 women annually. We provide different training services, including labor market reentry, as well as educational services.
And you're a not-for-profit organization?
Yes, we are.
And so where does your funding come from?
We're funded. We have a diverse funding model. We do fundraising events. We get corporate donations as well as government grants to support our programs and services.
And so obviously that's one of your challenges, is to make sure that you can keep the lights on. So if anyone's listening today, they'll be more than happy to accept any donations, I'm sure. So now that we understand what West does, West was the lead on a new study that just came out. That's why I wanted to have you on the show today. And the study, which I have here in front of me, is called Women's Financial Preparedness, Bridging the Divide in Windsor, Essex, which is where we are today. So tell me a bit about the study. What was the point of it? What did you discover as a result of this study?
So in 2015, West received a grant from Status of Women Canada, and we worked in collaboration with Financial Fitness, the local financial institutions, looking at women's financial preparedness, the challenges that women have in terms of being prepared for their financial future, as well as the systemic barriers that may exist that limits women's ability to be prepared financially.
And what kind of things did you discover then? So I said at the opening that on the one hand, you wouldn't think there would be any differences. I mean, the population's half men, half women. And yet when we did our own study, we did find, in fact, there are some very real differences. And some of them, from my perspective, are fairly easy to understand because it's women who are much more likely to leave the workforce to take care of children. It's women who are much more likely to be taking care of aging parents, for example. So it's obvious why some of those things, why there are some differences. What specific differences or challenges did you find? What were some of the things that you found in the study?
Well, as you know, women traditionally has earned less than men, and that was something similar that you guys found in your study. Mm-hmm. But what we found was that when it came time, if there was a financial crisis, 40% of women would actually only be able to sustain themselves for less than 1 week. And in a community that predominantly has a high representation of single mothers, women and children are living in poverty, and this is concerning for us in the community as a whole.
So you identified 3 different vulnerable groups, I think is the term that you used. Young women under 29 years old, women who earn less than $40,000 a year, and then women who are 60 years and older. Are there reasons for those different groups that you think?
Well, what we found with young women was that they were less likely to be actively involved in their financial preparedness. So they tend to rely on their parents to guide them, while young men under the age of 29 actually were more involved in financial decision-making than young women. I believe it was 30% of young women indicated that they were not involved in financial decision-making compared to 14% of young men.
And do you have any idea why that is?
Based on the anecdotal evidence that we gathered, speaking with women in the community, one reason is just the role of women in society. A lot of times where parents are concerned, male are seen as the providers. They're seen as the breadwinners within their families, and parents will train and position their sons to take on those roles, while women tend to not be encouraged that way.
So that sounds kind of sexist to me, that if I'm a parent, and I have 2 boys, so I know nothing about females whatsoever. I have a wife, but that's the extent of my experience. Okay. So I can't speak from experience as if I had a daughter and a son, how I would treat them differently, because I've never been in that position. But I would think, well, I think I'd treat them pretty much the same. Like, I'd make sure they both understood what writing a check meant. You're saying that that's really not the case, that parents do not educate their children similarly.
Exactly. And this is not solely just an issue with parents. This stems a little bit deeper. When you look at it systemically, women's interactions with the financial institutions is also based on gender.
And this is a good point, and I wanted to raise this because there's a section in the study that talks specifically about this. So the study says that when interacting with the financial industry, women are offered financial products and services based on their role as a mother, wife, or widow. The general consensus amongst financial professionals that women associate their financial wealth to the financial health of their children, whereas men seek products or services that better position them for retirement. So I interpret from that then, okay, banks, for example, treat men and women differently. And I don't fully understand that because according to the Canadian Bankers Association, 61% of the workforce of Canadian banks are female. And I think in your study that you actually surveyed people who work in financial institutions, and the people you surveyed were overwhelmingly female. I think it was like 80% of the study sample was female. So if it's females who are working in the bank, are they giving different advice or treating differently their female clients than they do their male clients? Is that what the study is saying?
In essence, yes, it is. And in addition to speaking with the financial institutions, we actually asked women and men in the community how they were perceived by the financial institutions. And what we found was that 60% of women and 40% of men agree that the financial institution does treat men and women differently. We also found that 65% of women and 52% of men identified that when they do go to meet a financial representative, that the financial representative is more likely to speak to the male as opposed to the female. The other finding that we had was that 60% of women and 40% of men agree that men are taken more seriously by the financial institution. So not only does this have to do with parenting, but there is definitely a systemic challenge that women face in terms of being able to gain the financial skills and knowledge they need.
And the problem isn't just that men treat women differently, it's that the institutions treat them differently. So even if I was a female bank officer, I would be more predisposed to be addressing my questions to the male as opposed to the female.
Exactly. And we need to recognize that there was a significant percentage of men that agreed with that statement, that they know that when they enter the financial institution with their significant other, that the products and services are being sold to them.
And I guess that's probably true in other places. Like if my wife and I went to buy a car, probably the car salesman would talk to me, not to her.
Exactly.
Which is why we never go buy cars together. She goes buys her car, I buy mine. It all works out great. So what is the solution to that then? Because I can understand that as a human being, I'm going to treat anyone who is different than me differently. That's kind of an inbred bias that we have. If I'm tall and you're short, well, I'm going to treat you differently than if you were tall, I guess. But if we're both tall and yet I'm treating you differently, that kind of blows my mind. I'm a female bank officer and I live it myself. I've been treated this way myself. And yet when I'm meeting with clients, I'm still treating the woman different than the man. That's kind of what your study is saying. Is it just because that's the way it's always been?
Well, it's an institutional culture, and I don't think gender has a lot to do with that culture, right? The financial representatives are trained to sell certain products, and those products are geared towards the needs of men. The other thing that the research found was that while there are specific products for students, there's specific products for seniors, for newcomers, and different groups, there is nothing specific to the needs of women. So if the representatives are saying that women's financial livelihood or future is tied with that of their children, and they're only being sold products that would enhance the lives of their children, there is nothing to help women overcome that obstacle as well.
So you're going to have to work with me here. I'm kind of slow, so you're going to have to explain this to me. So I understand if I'm a student, how there could be a specific product for me. Mm-hmm. A student loan, for example, which would only apply to a student. I think you sort of gave an example there then of a product that would be more male-oriented or female-oriented. But can you flesh that out for me? So can you give me some examples of what's a more male-oriented product and what's a more female-oriented product?
I think it has a lot more to do, not necessarily with the product, but the presentation of the product and what the product does. It's what finance is emotional. Mm-hmm. Right? And the way men look at money may be different than how women look at money, and how products are being explained to women would need to tie into those emotional elements that are key to women's financial decision making. In the U.S., there are great initiatives right now that are actually run by women, and they provide products and services specific to the needs of women. These are investment products, and it's not that the products are any different than any other investment products, but it's how it's packaged, it's how it's explained, it's how the financial representatives are sharing that information to women so that they're able to understand it. The language being used is a language of exclusion, right?
So let's talk about investment products then. And I guess you're talking about things like mutual funds or something like that. So how does that get explained to a man versus how that gets explained to a woman? Or is it a case that it just doesn't get explained to a woman? Like what's the specific difference that your participants would see?
It doesn't get explained to women necessarily, right? A lot of and this is anecdotal, these weren't questions we asked specifically in the research, but we have a council of women of 15 women that have helped to steer the project as we've gone through. And we've spoken to our clients, and based on our experience and Financial Fitness's experience with their clients, but what we found was that when women go to the banks, when they go to their financial representatives, they're not offered those investment products. And when they are offered investment products, it's not explained to them in a manner where they understand. So women are less likely to do investments than men would be. So I come into the bank and you're the bank person, and you look in my bank account and you see I've got $10,000 cash. So presumably as a banker, you'd say, this is a prime opportunity here. Someone's got some money. We could put them in mutual funds. We could put them in GICs, something like that. If you were trying to sell that to me as a woman, is it as simple as speak up and actually tell me that kind of stuff? Don't gloss over it. Is that kind of what we see happening, or are there specific ways that it needs to be done? I think that there are assumptions of basic knowledge of these products and services. One of the things that we've done with this project is that we've held information sessions, and the common theme throughout these information sessions, financial information sessions, is that they felt that those representatives were non-judgmental. They were able to provide the information using examples that were real and relatable for women, right? And it's talking about real life stories that women can relate to. And I've attended those sessions, and it's completely different than when I go to a financial institution and sit down with an advisor and the information that I'm getting and the manner that I'm getting the information in. Having that type of forum actually made me realize that there is a difference in how we get information.
So if I was the head of the biggest bank there's a lot of money I can be making here, because it sounds like there's a market that I am not servicing, exploiting, if you want to use that word. But I mean, is that true? That if I'm selling products to this person but not that person, well, why aren't I selling products to that person too? Why don't the banks kind of wake up and see this? This seems like they're leaving a lot of money on the table here.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, there are great programs out in the U.S. that are targeting this particular niche, and that's what we're pushing for. We're asking for the financial institutions to look at how they can cater to the needs of women. Women make up 55% of the labor force, right? They're outnumbering men in terms of labor market participation. They're the decision makers in the households, but the decisions that they're making is related to everyday living. Women need to be educated and provided support in terms of long-term financial preparedness. And we're living in a day and age where there's less and less government social securities and women outlive men. And this is why this is really concerning for us, is that women outlive men by almost 10 to 20 years.
Wow. So, okay, let's talk about retirement then. So I assume then retirement is going to be a big issue if I'm a female and living longer, and yet I also have either less knowledge or less access to resources or less resources. What can you tell me about retirement?
The most interesting thing that we found with retirement was the fact that men start planning for retirement between the ages of 30 to 39. Women do not start planning for retirement until they're in their 50s to 59. And that has a lot to do with the fact that women's finances are tied to that of their children.
Women's finances are tied to that of their children, meaning first I get my kids out the door, and then I start worrying about myself.
Absolutely. And at the age of 50 to 59...
The kids are hopefully gone by then.
Well, either that or they're part of your retirement plan.
Right. So whereas men don't think that way.
No, they're starting young. They're starting to plan for their future at a way younger age. And as we were putting this research together and talking about the findings, so many women confirmed the fact that, especially at our organization, we're a women's organization, many of my colleagues do not have a retirement plan for themselves. Their focus has been on educating their children, putting their children through. And the expectation was that the husband's income was focused towards investments and the wife's income was focused on the children's needs.
And what then, and part of that, I guess, is what you said earlier, that if a woman's income is lower, or if, she's off work for a period of time looking after kids, looking after elderly parents or something, then there just isn't enough money there that can be devoted to retirement. First of all, I got to worry about the day-to-day stuff. I got to pay the rent, pay the groceries, that kind of thing. So presumably a lot of it is tied up in that. Are there any solutions then? So, how would you advise a woman with respect to retirement? Is the first step to at least acknowledge what you just said, that you got to start thinking about it sooner?
Absolutely. I think that there is a responsibility, not just on the financial institutions. This messaging of women's finances being tied with that of their children comes through the fact that child tax benefits, it goes to the women, right? The government has kind of promoted this notion that children are women's responsibilities. And once women start to realize that they need to invest in themselves, invest in their future, and that is also considered an investment in their children. Living in poverty when you retire is not good for the community, and it's not good for families. It was interesting for us to find out that 22% of women were confident once they retired that they would be okay, compared to 73% of men. Retired men were much more comfortable in retirement than women.
And that's interesting what you said. Children are viewed as women's responsibility, and which I guess on the one hand, well, yeah, I can see why that would be. But again, getting back to this whole theme of institutionalization, the child tax credit, for example, is sent to the woman. Is that how it works, or is it sent to the lower income?
It's the lower income, and we live in a society where
where that is almost always the woman. Yeah. So now you're certainly not saying, oh, well, we should be sending the child tax credits to men. That doesn't make any sense.
No, I'm saying that the messaging that gives, because if that money, it's a child tax, you assume that money is for the children, right? And they put that money towards their children and their money towards the children. I just think that behavior is the hardest thing to change, and it takes time to change. And if there's a collective message encouraging women not to see investing in their future, in their retirement, as a selfish act, but actually an act that benefits the family as a whole and the community, right?
Well, and ultimately, at some point in your life, you have to be selfish. You have to take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
And like when your kids are 45 years old, are you still going to be supporting them? Or is there going to be a time when you say, no, I got to start looking after myself? Well, maybe that's a decision that has to go through your mind earlier, I guess. You made a key comment, I think, earlier, because I'm thinking in my head here, okay, what's the solution? What's the solution? What's the solution? And can you give me the solution in like a 140-word tweet here to solve all of our problems? Or no, that's not going to happen today. So let's kind of think this through. You used the word emotion earlier. So, and you said something to the effect of we make a lot of our decisions based on emotion. And how does that factor into this then? Is that something we have to be conscious of then? When I go into a bank, do I have to be conscious and say, hey, I'm going to be asking some questions. I need some answers. Is that part of the solution here?
Absolutely. But I think it goes a little bit step further, is that women actually need to be trained earlier on, right? We learn about finances and financial management, and you hear people talking about money messages. All these messagings are given at an earlier age, either through the educational system, the family, the institutions, and so forth. Those messagings need to change at an earlier age, where women need to be seen as equal decision makers when it comes to finances, and be equipped with the same type of knowledges that young men and young boys have, so that when they do go to the financial institutions, they're able to make informed decisions. In order for it to be informed, both people have to come to the table with some level of knowledge. And women don't have that basic level of knowledge going to the table.
So the first step is education. And maybe even awareness is before education, I guess. Why would I learn something if I don't even know I need to learn it? And that has to start very, very early then.
Absolutely.
So early, like, little kids you can't start too early, I guess. How would you start that then? Is that if you're sitting down with a new parent today, okay, your kid's 2 days old, we don't have to talk about it yet, but by the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, that's when these perceptions start to become ingrained, I would assume. What kind of things would you be saying then to a young parent who's got perhaps both a daughter and a son? What do I need to be aware of? That I've got these hidden biases that I'm going to be treating my son differently than my daughter. What are some things I should be aware of so that I'm not letting that happen? Is there anything practical I can do?
Well, we met with a group of young mothers, and the one thing that we guided them was that they should be encouraging savings at a younger age for both genders, right? And it's a trip to the bank. It's also encouraging young girls to ask those questions. There was one case that was shared in one of our council meetings where one young girl said that when my parents took me to the bank, I just sat there and they made all the decisions. Right? And the financial representative spoke to the parents, and the parents spoke back. And this young girl who was preparing to go off to university just sat there. Well, what ended up happening was when she got to university, all the credit cards started to come in, and she blew her credit. Why? Because she didn't realize the full cycle of what those decisions are. And someone always made those decisions on their behalf.
And is that story you're telling me just happen in the financial world, or would it happen in other worlds too? So for example, if I'm a mother and I'm taking my daughter to, I don't know, the dentist, the doctor, something like that, would it be the same scenario where the parent does all the talking, or would it be or would the child be more encouraged to talk in different environments, or is it the same either way?
I feel that these are social norms, right?
So it's not a money thing. This is just the way our brains are wired at the moment, or we've been taught to be wired this way, and we have to actually be conscious of it. So, and you gave a couple of real practical things there. Okay, savings. You've got to talk to your kids, and I think that's great advice. Like, that's how can you argue with that? But whether it's a daughter or a son, the advice is exactly the same. And the other thing you said was ask questions. Doesn't matter if you're male or female, ask questions. Don't be just sitting there. So, two final questions for you then. Is there anything else in the study that, you think our listeners should be aware of that we haven't covered? And then my second question will be to cycle back to different recommendations. So is there anything in the study that either popped out at you or was of interest that we should talk about?
I guess the only other thing looking at young people is that 45% of female youth compared to 22% of young men had no retirement plan. So again, young boys are being encouraged to plan for their future earlier than young girls are being encouraged.
And again, that's a societal thing.
I do believe so. The one thing that we are looking at as a response and what came out of the research was a collective approach to this issue. So we've established a financial empowerment network, and this is a network of community organizations working with these vulnerable populations. So those working with youth, individuals living in poverty. We've been looking at work and the financial institutions, working with them to come up with a plan for Windsor, Essex. And also, the collaborative's objective is to ensure that financial empowerment actually becomes part of the poverty reduction strategy. So in order to address poverty, we feel that people need to be financially literate and have a financial plan for their future.
Which would have a huge benefit to society. Yeah,
and the common response that we get is if someone's living in poverty, how can they put money aside for the future? It's about that behavior. Even if it's $1, even if it's $5 out of whatever money that they're getting in, that would help to start modeling that behavior for when they do have increase in wealth, when they do see themselves slowly emerging out of poverty, that they're going to continue that practice and increase those contributions that they're making towards their future.
Yeah, and obviously once they've saved enough, they're not in poverty anymore. You've kind of solved the issue. So let's talk then about recommendations. What can actually be done? So my first idea, and you could tell me if this is crazy or not, is it sounds to me like there is a huge untapped market here. There are, I assume in the general population, more females than males because they live longer.
Yes.
You already said that the workforce is 55% female. So there's more customers. So as a provider of any service there is, I should be going after females as clients. So if I run a bank, then I should be specifically targeting them. Now, I'm sitting here thinking about this because, of course, I run a personal insolvency firm, and we don't target anyone in particular. I mean, we target people with debt. So I am happy to help males, females, tall, short, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. But what you're saying is either I'm unusual or I have biases I don't even know about. That when I'm sitting talking to two different people, I will treat them differently and I'm not even aware of it, which may be true. Maybe we have to do some hidden camera things with me to see if that's actually the case. So recommendation number one then is if you run a bank, there's a market here to be exploited, and the way to do it is by training your people.
Absolutely. The one thing that came out of the information, once we disseminated the information through a summit last month, a lot of the financial representatives, the feedback that we got in the survey saying that they weren't aware. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So if the individuals that are providing the services are not aware of these biases that they may have, raising that awareness is definitely the first thing to change.
So if I'm a bank employee And we're only picking on banks because this was a financial preparedness study, but I mean, we could be picking on doctors, lawyers, dentists, gas station attendants, I guess. But if I'm a bank employee and you've got a minute to make me aware, can you give me another illustration then of how I would treat a female client different than a male client? Is it as simple as, I understand what you're saying, if there's a male and a female there, a husband and wife, for example, the natural tendency, and it doesn't matter if the bank employee is male or female, they're going to be directing their attention towards the male. So I understand that. That's something we've got to consciously decide to do differently. What if I'm just speaking with a female?
I think one of the things is to ask those questions in terms of what their emotional attachment are to their financial planning and their investments, right? And to try and educate from that perspective. So, for example, I run a program with youth. I've sent all the youths to meet with their financial representatives at their various institutions. I've equipped them with questions that they should ask and so forth. And when they went to that meeting, because they were better prepared, they were and aware, they were able to redirect the discussion a little bit and ask questions and get responses that met their needs. So if financial institutions were able to say, okay, fine, you're a mother of 3 children, you're a single mother of 3 children, I understand that you want to put away for RESPs and these different things. Have you considered about retirement? Right? For the most part, when our clients go, there's only 2 things that they know. Retirement education savings plan. Some asked us what were RRSPs, and the tax-free savings account. But there are other ways for women to plan for their future. So,
okay, let's say I'm a woman and I'm going to go meet with my banker this afternoon. Give me a question I should ask them.
Wow.
I'm putting you on the spot here. I want actual tangible things that we can, and I realize everybody's different. Everybody's a different situation. A single mother of 3 who's 29 years old is totally different than a 70-year-old woman. But what kind of things should I at least have in my brain when I walk in?
We always encourage our clients to ask, how can I plan for my future? So, okay, yes, I'm looking at debt consolidation, or I'm looking at various savings plans for my children. Okay, well then what can I do for myself? I'll be retiring in 20 years, in 10 years, in 30 years. How would I be able to start saving for retirement? Should I be maybe reducing how much I'm putting in RESPs and maybe, splitting those contributions or something like that?
Yeah, and there's no right answer. But if you don't ask the questions, you're not going to be even close. So if you just automatically default to, well, I'm the mother, my goal is to take care of my kids, that's it, full stop, that's it. Okay, well, that may be it is a perfectly good goal, but have you even considered the other ones? That's really what you're saying.
Absolutely. I recently went to go meet with my financial advisor after doing all of this research, and one of the recommendations was you should be doing it yearly. You should be doing an annual financial checkup. Last time I did mine was 3 years ago. So I went in and I said, okay, I'm currently doing my PhD. I'm a student. What are your recommendations? And I only got recommendations for being a student. And I said, okay, but I'm also a mother of 3 children. I have another 30 years till I'm retiring. How can I achieve these other goals? Right?
Was the person who was interviewing you, were they male or female?
Male.
Aha, so you see. Stupid men. Don't know anything. But you hit the nail on the head. You asked the questions. So they defaulted to, oh, you're a mother. Boom. You're a student. Boom. They kind of went down the obvious path. And you are a student. You are a mother. So, those were valid things. But they didn't also see you as a complete human being who will at some point retire or want to buy another car or buy another house or take a trip or whatever. So ultimately it was up to you to put the discussion in the right direction. And did you end up getting the answers that you wanted?
No.
So should we mention the name of this person, the institution, and call them out right here, right now? Or
no. To be honest with you, the information that I got from the informal sessions amongst a group of women was completely different than the information I got when I went to the financial institution.
And was this financial institution person just not knowledgeable enough, or they've got these products to sell and that's how we're doing it and we don't really care what you're saying?
Absolutely. They were selling according to the need that I presented, as opposed to exploring. They had the information to see that I had children. They had the information to see that, I'm a homeowner or these different things. And I did explain that it's been 3 years and I'm here to kind of do a checkup and to explore options and so forth. But my first presentation was that I was a student, and that's what I was looking at, in terms of not incurring any student debt or anything like that. And that's what they focused on.
So they went to the easy answer.
Right. They didn't focus on those other elements, which I really feel that it's important. Like you cannot look at it.
Oh, we've just smashed the microphone here. So
you can't look at a person as just one thing. You have to look at them in their completeness. You cannot look at a woman as just being a wife or just being a mother. You have to see her as a mother, a wife, a worker.
Yeah, because we're human beings.
Absolutely.
If I go to the doctor and tell him I've got a sore elbow, well, I guess he'll treat the sore elbow. If he doesn't ask me, well, what about all those other things that are wrong with you or need attention, then I guess I'm not going to get any feedback on that. And that's really what you're saying in your case. Hi, I'm a student. Oh, okay, boom. Let's pull out the student checklist. Boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. Anything else about you? I guess you're just a one-dimensional being. You don't have to talk about anything else. Yeah. And so it was up to you to keep pushing. Oh, by the way, I'm also this, this, and this. I'm a mother, I'm a parent, I'm whatever. But even when you pushed, you're saying you still didn't get as complete an information as you got in some other environments.
And it was always me saying, oh, but this is what I was told when I went to this information session. They would go outside and they would double check and come back and say, oh yeah, that's accurate. Or,
So have you fired your bank then?
No, I'm just going to look for another advisor.
Well, that's what I mean. That's kind of what firing is.
Well, that individual, but I'll keep shopping around in the financial institutions. I think the key is to the financial representative needs to match the person. And I know that the industry is kind of like whoever's available, that's who they put you with. And that was the difference with these information sessions, is that the person providing the information matched the needs of the group. So whether it was a group of single mothers, they were coming in and speaking specifically to those needs.
So you can pick your advisor.
Absolutely.
It's not whoever's there. I mean, it's not like I'm buying a hamburger at the hamburger joint. Whoever's serving me, that's who's going to make my hamburger, right? This is your money. This is your life. And you probably got another 20 to 50 years left on the clock. So let's get the right person. So, and don't we do that in other areas of our life too? Like if my auto mechanic does a lousy job, I don't keep going back.
Or if my auto mechanics doesn't explain things to me because I'm a woman, I don't go back.
And you find one, and maybe you got to go through 10 auto mechanics.
Right.
And maybe you got to talk to someone who refers you to someone who refers you to someone. But isn't it the same with everything we do? We don't have to default to, oh, well. I mean, I'm sure if I was to ask all my listeners right now to put up their hands, which I wouldn't be able to see because this is a podcast, but how long have you been with your bank? More than 10 years or less than 10 years? And I would suspect that the vast majority of people have been with the same bank for more than 10 years. And if we were to drill down further, why are you with that bank? I mean, I know my own story. My parents went to the, Bank A. And so until I was, married, I was with that bank. And my wife was at Bank B, so I switched to that bank, and I'm still with that bank. So in my life, I've been with two banks. And I'm oversimplifying the story slightly, but not much. So why am I with the bank? Well, is it because I did a rational evaluation and looked around? Well, maybe it was the path of least resistance. Well, when it comes to your money, you can't do that. You've actually got to be a little more aggressive with it. And I guess societally, we're not really trained to do that. Both, males and females, but perhaps more likely with females. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, that's correct. I recently, at our agency, we have, they've set up investment accounts for us, and the advisor came in and, we were all told to do moderate investments.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I could just, I can go aggressive.
Yeah, whether you're young, old, everyone's moderate.
Exactly, right? Yep. But no, we were all told, no, that's not a good idea and stuff like that. And now shopping around and being a little bit more aware and talking to other people, I'm realizing that. And then I asked all my colleagues and they're like, yeah, we were told the same thing. And I'm like, well,
Yeah, great individualized advice. So, just before I forget, what are you getting your PhD in?
Public policy.
Why?
Policy drives everything that we do as a community organization, as well as just in society, social needs and how they're addressed and dealt with.
So when I have you back on this podcast in 5 years...
It'll be in a year.
In a year?
Okay.
So, okay, well, excuse me. In a year, so I'll have to call you Dr. Graham. And so let's go 5 years in the future then. What will you be doing in 5 years?
I hope to remain in the community. The one thing that I did mention is that I am the Senior Manager of Research and Development at West. Evidence-based work is what's fueling the community today, and nonprofit organizations are required to...
Evidence-based, so that means facts.
Exactly.
Oh, that's good.
And that's what this research is, and the research that we've done, all of our research tends to inform our programming, right?
Good.
So based on this research, we've now embedded financial literacy into all of our programs and services because we realize the importance of educating the women we serve.
Excellent. Well, I like that. If you're basing stuff on facts, how can anyone criticize you? I mean, I guess anyone can criticize anyone because I don't agree with your facts, but facts aren't something you can disagree with. Facts are facts. It's, how you interpret them perhaps is different, but well, and you and I are of the same mindset. I mean, that's why we do our Joe Debtor study, is to see what do the numbers actually show, because I have my own perception, my own anecdotal evidence, but when you actually see it in writing, then you can make some better decisions. So, well, I think that's great. So is there anything else in the study we didn't hit on, or are there any other recommendations that we need to pop out there, that we've missed?
The one key recommendation that came out from the Council of Women that were kind of steering the research was that the financial institutions and organizations need to market real-life scenarios. Women need to see themselves represented in not just the products and services, but how they're being marketed. So when you go to the bank and you see the picture of the husband and the wife and the home, or the husband and the wife and the new car, or the husband and the travel trips, or whatever the case may be, Windsor has about 46% of single mothers, right? There's nothing targeting their needs, or maybe to show them a future that they could have as well. So the women really recommend it. And that's one of the things that we did do, is that we showcase stories of women and women's experiences and how their financial struggles have come to inform them and make them who they are. Which
ties into your comment about emotion.
Absolutely.
You've got to link in with people at an emotional level. And if all you're going to do is show me advertisements with mother, father, 2.3 kids, a dog, and a cat, and that's not my situation, then it's not going to resonate with me. I'm not going to go forward. So there's a ton of work that the financial institutions, banks, credit unions, and so on can do here and help improve things. So excellent. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. Georgia, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That was my discussion with Georgia Graham, the programs manager at West. West is the Women's Enterprise Skills Training of Windsor, Inc., and they did a study on women's financial empowerment, bridging the divide in Windsor and Essex, and there were 4 key recommendations, I think, that I got from what Georgia said. Number 1, banks, other financial institutions need some training because it is often that they default to speaking to the male as opposed to the female, or addressing products more that are suitable to men than women, even though there are certainly products that benefit both. So, and I think it's a subconscious thing. They're not even aware of it because it's even the women employees at the bank who are doing this. So some better training to make them aware of this would probably start alleviating some of those issues. She also mentioned, number 2, the whole emotional attachment that we have to certain things. And the correct answer then, if the bank person is not giving you the advice that you need, is you have to stick up for yourself and ask one obvious question, which is, how can I plan for my future? Start asking questions about you. So if they want to sell you products for your kids, RESPs and things like that, well, that's great. But what about my retirement? How can I plan for my future? So I thought that was a good positive recommendation. Also, with respect to banks, this whole concept of marketing real life scenarios. Every bank commercial you ever see, there's a husband, a wife, 2.3 children, a dog, and a cat. Well, as she said, 46% of mothers in Windsor are single mothers. So if there were advertising and marketing and products directly centered around the specific people that they're seeing, that would probably make the customers feel better, but also would be better for the banks as well. And then the final piece of advice is that you can pick your own advisors. So if you go to a bank or a doctor or a dentist or anybody else and you don't think that they are serving your needs, they're not giving you all the different options that are out there, you can switch. You don't have to stay with your bank for life. If you're not getting the support that you need, if you're not getting the advice that you need, then move. No reason you can't do that. So a lot of great advice there. I'm going to put links to everything that we talked about, including this study from West and West themselves, in the show notes, which you can find at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.